sadism, bestiality, mutilation, murder, vampirism, necrophilia, cannibalism, not to mention a gamut of sexual goodies. Shall I go on?
It was pure evil.
Famine, pestilence, war, disease, and death. They rule this world.
The unchained elements of the powers of darkness are lying in ambush. Beware!
The boat can leave now. Tell the crew.
This is Cannibal Holocaust. Horror cinema's underrated, unreleased, and unbelievable.
Brownie points have yet to be accepted as a valid form of currency. Nonetheless, I may accrue a pocketful from all the female horror fans listening out there when I say that you certainly were dealt an unfair hand. Childbirth and PMS? Now, whether you believe that God or evolution is the culprit, there was in fact an attempt, perhaps albeit a feeble one, to even the score. Elaine Bennis, a character from the iconic 90s sitcom Seinfeld, in a classic episode, ever so poignantly uttered the phrase, "I don't know how you guys walk around with those things." As someone who has had one of those things for several decades and counting, I don't know either. And before I go waxing poetic on the battle of the sexes, let me stop myself and tell you what the hell this has to do with the horror genre. Well, before I reveal that, another topic must first be broached. My name is Tom, and welcome back to Cannibal Holocaust. Special effects, particularly in genre films, are in fact special, and to many of us horror fans, very special. Now, I grew up in the decade that would become synonymous and notorious for perhaps the ultimate level of quality in this facet of filmmaking, the 80s. But I also grew up in a very religious household, and was therefore graciously spared the evils of horror and all of its mind-warping messages. So I would have to wait until my mid-teen years to witness the jaw-dropping works from the likes of Savini, Nicotero, Johnson, Botten, Baker, and Winston. But still, there were plenty of other, I suppose for my sake, more wholesome examples I could revel in. All of that incredible puppetry in Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal, and how about that snarling wolf in The Never-Ending Story? I fell in love with practical effects quickly, and as I would later ever so frantically make up for lost time in my fervent plunge into the horror genre, I would fall in love all over again. A love that proved eternal. Technology is a key and ever so necessary component in the evolution of both society and industry, and while it unquestionably brings us advancements that compel us to say, how did we ever live without that? It could also hamper and be detrimental to something that we, in fact, shouldn't live without. CGI effects are a blessing and required in modern filmmaking. Of course it is. I mean, how else would you get Spider-Man to swing himself from skyscraper to skyscraper in his latest quest to fight evil? However, for me anyway, there is a time and a place. And while an extensive portion of the horror genre is steeped in the mythological, metaphysical, and supernatural, it is, ultimately, organic. For the very genuine emotions it so effectively elicits, like fear, suspense, disgust, and awe, should that not then be derived from something in fact organic? In a 2018 interview, visual effects supervisor Scott Farrar, a veteran of the Transformers franchise, discussed his work on John Krasinski's box office smash, A Quiet Place. He was asked if there was any consideration for the creatures to be done practically. His answer was simply no. I thought A Quiet Place was a great film, except for one large problem. Those CGI creatures, as is always the case, took me completely out of the film and alienated any atmosphere and dread that was so wonderfully built. Perhaps minor embellishments aside, there is no time and place, quiet or not, for CGI effects in the horror genre. In most cases, the use of CGI effects stem from a conscious decision fueled by either production and industry standards to a rather condescending motive of budgetary limitations, which ironically comes from productions that have budgets that most filmmakers would salivate over. CGI effects are often cheaper, and let's face it, easier. Why pay a hard-working full crew over a man or two at a desk? Which leads me to this, the artistry itself. Where has it gone? Luckily, thanks to the independent scene, both here in the States and around the world, practical effects and its artists are alive and well. And we are still blessed with filmmakers who, even with a complimentary budget, choose to go against the grain and support and cultivate said artistry. I'm looking at you, Panos Cosmatos, Ari Aster, and Robert Eggers. Seeing documentaries and bonus features over the years of special effects teams working their magic is truly inspiring. Whether it be the incredible and exhausting work of the artist that brought John Carpenter's The Thing to a hellish life, or in Ty West's modern indie masterpiece, The House of the Devil, a small and utterly frozen crew's jubilation after nailing a Savini-esque head explosion in the backseat of a car. Therefore, shouldn't artistry and its associated trials be culminated with the sound of cheers and not the click of a mouse? So now, in fears of me sounding even more pedantic in my practical effects politics, let me now bring things full circle. Well, at least my meager and obtuse attempt at such circle. From a physical gore perspective, practically speaking of course, for me the most memorable and effective gore gags come from a place of wince-inducing disgust. I mean, I love a superbly executed classic throat slash or an over-the-top decapitation, a ferociously detached limb and its subsequent crimson fountain, or a zoom lens catching that stake thrusted into that damn bloodsucker's chest. But you know what really resonates with me? How about the unforgettable splinter to the eye of the lovely Olga Karlatos in Fulci's masterpiece Zombie? Or a similarly effective retina violation in Gary Sherman's underrated Dead and Buried? But as a man, what thwarts the testosterone? What banishes the bravado? And what lynches the libido? Our curse. The male curse. A real-life gore gag instilled upon us, well, most of us, at an early age from a holy hand, circumcision. Whether it be a castration or a full detachment, penis gore, the gore that hits me the hardest. As stated in the show's intro, I will be covering the genre's underrated, unreleased, and unbelievable. And thus, in this case, the underrated, a film I feel is overlooked and deserves more attention, or at the very least, very much worth your time to make your own assessment. Today we take a look at the Australian film from 2007, Storm Warning. Australia has a rather vast and accomplished horror history. One of my favorite vampire films of all time is the incredibly original film entitled Thirst. The odd and compelling next of kin in Patrick, the hauntingly atmospheric The Picnic at Hanging Rock, and the wonderfully creepy found footage film Lake Mungo. The esoteric The Last Wave, and the joyously demented The Loved Ones, as well as plenty of recent gems like the frenetic zombie epic Wormwood, the brutal slasher Charlie's Farm, the provocative and downbeat Red Christmas, and the brilliantly metaphorical The Babadook. But perhaps its best contributions, or at the least the most potent ones, are the films that use the region's biggest asset for evoking terror and tension, its land itself and those that occupy it. Australian filmmakers over the years have taken wildlife creature features and backwoods depravity to new heights with a zealous and menacing authenticity, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, to the nation's commerce and tourism industry. From The Reef to Blackwater, from Razorback to Long Weekend to the Wolf Creek series, the locals are mad and the wildlife even angrier. I suppose a big factor in us fright fans' apparent appeal to the region's tales is its proximity, or lack thereof, to most of us. Australia may as well be on another planet, as it literally inhabits the other side of the globe. For those of us lucky enough to have visited, and I have friends who have, it is surely a magical and beautiful place, but also frightening. Directed by Jamie Blanks, most known for Urban Legend and Valentine, this tells the story of a storm that forces a couple to land their sailboat far ashore on a remote island inhabited by a demented father and his psychotic sons. Captured, beaten, and sexually enslaved, the couple tries to turn the tables in a bloody fight for survival. If that sounds like a run-of-the-mill, back-of-the-DVD case synopsis, well, it's because it is. But it's ambiguous enough to serve as a proper description. Now, when I recommend a film, I don't approach it as a review. I am not a reviewer or an aspiring film critic. I just want to tell you why I love a film so much, and if it sounds like it has elements that you would enjoy, then please give it a watch. If you have seen this film, please share your thoughts. And I do warn of moderate spoilers, but nothing to curse me over. Now let's begin with the small ensemble cast. I suppose I should say it is led by actor Robert Taylor, in that he would be the most notable as he is the star of the television series Longmire. I've never seen the show, and for me, he just reminded me of someone who could be the first cousin of actor Will Ferrell. My fellow genre fans, I'm sure, will be happy to see actor John Brumpton as one of the film's villains, recognizing him from the wonderful performance that he gave in a great film I mentioned earlier, The Loved Ones. But it is two relatively unknown actors that steal the show. French actress Nadia Fares, who plays Will Ferrell's cousin's love interest, and another Australian actor, David Lyons, who plays one of the demented sons. Now let's first discuss these villains. While they offer their fair share of backwoods debauchery and irreverence in the film, they are more the type of antagonists that would garner as a viewer your standard disdain, disgust, but also plenty of twisted smiles and laughs as opposed to pure terror. Lyons does a great job of spewing derogatory dialogue at the unlucky couple, often referring to their assumed wealth. He quite humorously refers to Robert Taylor's character, I will stop calling him Will Ferrell's cousin now, as Volvo. Apparently owning a Volvo is a sign of some great affluence, but as someone who once owned a Volvo, that is certainly not the case. And perhaps that's the joke, but I digress. When John Brumpton finally makes his appearance as a father, he immediately brings fear to his adoring sons. But with his post-drunk nap smirk, disheveled hair, and stained white shirt, nothing but a sheepish grin was brought to this viewer. But if you have seen the film, I am sure you will agree that, ultimately, this is Nadia Fares and her defiantly heroic character's film. I believe for many years that there was a huge and unfair misconception that the horror genre wasn't a fertile place for an actress seeking a strong and/or complex role or character, despite plenty of proof to the contrary. Evelyn Akers in The Wolfman, Catherine Deneuve in Repulsion, Mia Farrow in another Polanski film, Rosemary's Baby, Livia Hussey in Black Christmas, Zoe Lampert in Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and so on and so forth. But admittedly, many of the stronger roles for women throughout the decades were either a character dealing with a descent into madness, much to the skepticism or ignorance of her male counterpart, or, what would eventually become a well-worn cliché, the final girl. I am a huge fan of modern horror, hence the reason I have an annual award show, and besides the countless amazing films the genre has produced over recent years, I am equally as proud of the continued evolution of female roles within the genre. And I'm not just referring to the indie scene here. Anya Taylor-Joy in Robert Eggers' folk masterpiece The Witch, Jennifer Lawrence of all people in Darren Aronofsky's provocative Mother, Florence Pugh in Midsummer, and two true Oscar-caliber performances by Lupita Nyong'o's and Jordan Peele's Us, and Toni Collette in Ari Aster's Hereditary, just to name a few, of course. And while Nadia Fares' character in Storm Warning certainly doesn't boast the complex nuances of some of the performances I just mentioned, it is a joy, and to put it simply, just a blast, to witness her character's strength in fighting back against her captors. And what complements this fight so perfectly is what we discussed earlier, an array of fantastically executed practical gore effects. We have an encounter with a vicious dog, some equally unfortunate encounters with a truck and some farm equipment, and a superb and elaborate scene which would feel right at home in the Hellraiser universe. And what was my favorite? Well, we've reached the end of the circle. Yes, some penis gore. And while a Bop-It-esque cut or snip is, understandably, the industry standard, Storm Warning offers a little more creativity in its penile repertoire, a scene which will leave me pumping the proverbial fist, and I'll leave it at that. So if you're in the mood for a rain-soaked, gory island adventure with a strong female lead that plays out like an adult Home Alone, then please check out Storm Warning. Long live penis gore and girl power, and support the artists and artistry of practical effects, a cause I will forever aid and abet. So where can you see Storm Warning, you may ask? For the streamers out there, unfortunately, at the time of this episode, it is not available for streaming anywhere. But it is available for rent for just $2.99 on both Apple iTunes and YouTube. And for the physical collectors out there like myself, you can grab the DVD released by the once prolific Dimension Extreme label on Amazon and eBay for under $10. There are also some Region 2 Blu-rays available. Thank you all for listening to this, albeit short episode, and I want to also say thank you so much for the great response of the first episode. All of your comments, shares, messages, and feedback were very much appreciated. If you enjoy it, please continue to help spread the word. We are now available on most streaming platforms, including iTunes and Spotify. So stay safe, everybody. Stay scared. And I will talk to you soon on the next episode of Cannibal Holocaust.